Okay, yeah.
Hey everybody, my name is Drake the Snake, and we're gonna party without a break. Well, actually, my name is Calvin Drakeford. Originally, it was Marrell Drakeford. And when Mama went to get my birth certificate card, they made an error on it. So by the time she got home and realized that it was too late, and she decided because it cost too much, we'll just leave it at Marvell. My birthday is November 7th, 1955. I was born at 1107 as well. I was born at the Columbia Hospital for Women in DC. My mother's name is Lula Francine Drakeford, and my father's name is George Drakeford Jr. They both was from Lancaster, South Carolina, specifically Heath Springs, South Carolina, and they lived approximately 7 to 10 miles apart.
Do you have any siblings?
Yeah, I have 4 other siblings. One of them is deceased. Ernest James Drakeford, Vietnam War hero. He's deceased. Marion Thomas, she's the second of the Drakeford children. And then you have Frida Diane Muse, who's the third, and I'm the fourth, and then Valerie Antoinette Drakeford is the fifth of the Drakeford children. Well, I'll say he was a war hero. He, among his many medals, he received 2 Purple Hearts and the Bronze Star, and a bunch of other medals. He served in both the Army and the Navy. He got the medals primarily when he was in the Army, specifically in Vietnam. Yeah, so the first residence I remember, it was in Washington, D.C. It was in Southeast Washington, D.C. I believe it was Savannah Street or Savannah Terrace. And that was the first place I remember. And then from there, we moved to F Street Northwest. Then we moved to H Street Northwest. And then we moved to Coral Hills, Maryland. Yes, we moved to Coral Hills, and then we moved to Brooks Drive. And then when Mom and Dad separated, Mama moved to J Street, and I resided there with her, although I continued to go to the Maryland school. Beep, beep. And then I went into the Air Force when I was at Lackland Air Force Base, and I was at, as well as Chanute Air Force Base. And then when I came home, I stayed with Marion for a while until I got my first apartment, which was over in Kentland. And I believe I was probably around 21 or 22 at that time. And then I moved to Laurel. That was to be closer to my job and to school. And then I moved to Cheverly. When I got married with Sharon Rita Drakeford, we lived in Cheverly. And then from there, we moved to Glen Arden, Maryland, where we stayed for approximately about 7 years. And then we moved here to Mitchellville, where I currently reside. Even though Washington, D.C. was my first residence, both Northeast, Northwest, and Southeast, my formative years were in Prince George County. So yeah, I would consider myself a native Washingtonian, but I believe my home is Prince George County. You know, my father, George Drakeford Jr., he always had really good jobs. But to be honest with you, not just trying to throw shade on him or anything, but he wasn't the best manager of money. Even though he got paid good money, he wasn't the best manager. So we moved from different places as a result of that. But one thing that sticks out in my mind is that when we was actually going to get set out our apartment, they had put a note on the door saying that, you know, we was going to get evicted. And I remember that day. Coming home from school, because where we had to walk to the bus, it was about I guess about a half a mile, 3/4 of a mile. But we had to come over this steep hill, and I remember coming up to that steep hill, thinking that our furniture and stuff was going to be set out, and how I dreaded really coming home. And one thing I promised myself then was that, you know, as I got older and had a family, my children would never have to worry about that. So I think that kind of helped me, propel me to be a landlord and own property. I think that kind of sticks out well. I think in Core Hills where we were from the 3rd grade up to, I believe it's around the 11th grade. And then we moved to Brooks Drive where I did my senior year. I guess my 11th and 12th grade year was at Brooks Drive. There where I met, became close with a friend of mine named Earl Harrison, which was kind of weird really, because most of my friends lived over in the Core Hill, Capitol Heights area, which was kind of rough area. And we were thought of as thugs, to be honest with you. But Earl was a little different. He was a real studious person. And fortunately, when we moved up to Brook Drive, we became good friends. And that again helped me to in my schoolwork, because being the competitive nature I am, the classes that he and I took together, we really competed in those classes. I really competed, and so I did real well in those classes. Some of the other classes I didn't really work as hard as I probably should have, but in the class that he and I was in together, we really competed. And then once I got out of high school, I used to work at this men's clothing store. Well, really I work at the shoe store that's connected to the men's clothing store. And I'm sure all you guys out there remember Cavaliers. I worked in the shoe department and the shoe store in Cavaliers men's store. And then I left there after a short while and started working as an apprentice electrician for a Medallion Electric Company. And incidentally, I got that job because another friend of mine, William Workman, and I used to go play. We used to play bingo with his father-in-law. And one day while we was playing bingo, this white guy came up and asked us were we working, and I told him no, I wasn't working at the time. He said, well, would you like to be an electrician? I was like, hey, I'm not doing anything now. He said, the only thing you need to do is get your own tools. So I went and purchased my own tool, went up to the Union Hall, and then started working as an apprentice electrician. So, and then I bought me a little car, which was a Opel GT. And I guess I kind of fell in love with those cars because Marion's husband, Anthony Thomas, he had an Opel GT and taught me how to drive and whatnot. And so I kind of fell in love with that car. We used to call that a poor man's Corvette. So I think, and then I was driving, one day I was driving, a friend of mine called me and said, hey, I need you to take me to the hospital. So I was taking him to the hospital. And while I was driving, I threw a rod in the car. And for me, that was it. I was just kind of tired of it. I didn't want to be in the area any longer. I just wanted to go somewhere and think about some other things. So I had been thinking about joining the Air Force, but I guess I wasn't really progressing toward that. But once I threw the rod in my engine, that was it. I wanted to leave town, and I just went on open general, which is a way you can join the military. A lot of times you can go to a specific job, and that's why I was kind of waiting for a specific job. But I went on the open general, and fortunately I tested real high on the scores there, so I became a weather specialist there. You had to have a high score to become a weather specialist. I became a weather specialist, and I entered the Air Force, which incidentally I believe is one of the best things could have happened to me, because once I got in the Air Force, I got an opportunity to got away from all my knucklehead friends and everything. And once I got back home, I understood a lot more what life was about. I wanted to be rich. It didn't matter at that time how I was. I wanted to be rich. And one of the things I understand now, and probably didn't understand as well then, is that in order for you to dream about being certain things, you had to see that in your neighborhood. Unfortunately, we didn't have any accountants. We didn't have any doctors or lawyers or Indian chiefs. Pretty much what we had, the older guys who were working, a lot of them was mechanics. Some of them were, and they were not licensed mechanics. They was barnyard mechanics. Some of them were truck drivers, and others were gas station attendants. Because during that time, people didn't pump their own gas. You know, they had a person who worked at a gas station. He would pump your gas. So you didn't really have a lot of occupational, I would say, role models in the neighborhood. But fortunately, it was this one guy that named Larry Bailey, who used to be a good athlete. You know, he was around my older sister's age, and they went to school together. And I had heard, once I had moved from Coral Hills, I had heard that he had went to college, and he had played baseball, and he played basketball in high school. And I had heard that he had went away to college and became an accountant. And I believe that was my opening. The first idea I got about being an accountant was knowing that he had become an accountant and he went to college. So other than him, I didn't know a lot of people who had went to college. But once I will say that once I graduated from high school, and I guess it was maybe about a year or so after I had graduated from high school, I noticed that some of these young ladies who had been in my classes, who I was like blown away with grades. You know, I mean, not to be bragging, but I was way smarter than them. I saw that they were in college, and prior to that, I thought you almost had to be a genius, to go to college. And but once I saw that they had got in college, and I'm like, wait a minute, why can't I go to college? And from that on, that started being my goal. So even when I was an apprentice electrician, which, I think that's a good, good occupation. I think, I think a lot of other people, other young guys should look into the trade. But for me, it was like, I wanted something other than that. I wanted for lack of a better word, a professional job. And so I started, when I was working as an apprentice electrician, one of the guys there was teasing me about something. And I told him I wanted to go to college and be an electrician. And he thought that was real funny. You can't go to college. You can't be you can't be, you can't be an accountant, because I wanted to be an accountant. You can't be an accountant. And he thought it was so funny, that I had that kind of ambition. Well, for me, again, that's all I needed was for somebody to tell me I couldn't do something. And so there I started, again, another tick in my face journey to be an accountant. And then, like I said, once I left that job as apprentice electrician, I went into the Air Force. I started going back to school. And then once I got out of the Air Force, I completed my education at Bowie State University. Okay, I started out at this preschool over there in Southeast Washington. And then I went to Turner Elementary. And the thing about those two educational facilities, When I was, I'll say 5, for instance. When I was 5, or getting ready to become 5, I was ready to go to kindergarten. So mama took me up to Turner Elementary, and we sit there and they call everybody's name, and I sit and waited, and then they was finished and they never called my name. So mama went and tried to figure out what was going on, why I wasn't called. And what she found out was that in order for me to enroll in school, I had to be 5 prior to school starting. And in this instance, I wouldn't be 5 till November, and school started in September. Um, Later on in life, a lot of my high school friends, they used to thought I had stayed back a year because we had another young lady whose birthday was the same day as mine, but she was a year younger than me, and we were in the same grade. So, how could that be? Well, it was because in DC you had to be of age prior to school starting, and in Maryland at that time you had to be of age before the year ended. And so her and I had the birthday the same day, and we were in the same grade, but she was a year younger than me.
Okay.
Oh, thank you. So I went. So I went to Turner Elementary. Then we left there. I believe the school was called King Elementary, and we didn't stay there that long. That's when mom and dad was having their little difficulties. Then they got back together, and then we from there we moved to Maryland. At the time, dad was working at Hess Oil, and then he changed jobs and was working at for WM&A, which was the Maryland component bus line in the area. It's my understanding that he was the first black man to work for that bus line, which eventually, when WMA and DC Transit at the time, when they merged together, they became Metro. So we in the school I went to in Prince George. First school I went to in Prince George's was Bradbury Heights. I think we talked once before about was the school involved in segregation. It was segregated. Thank you. And it wasn't segregated when we got there, but it was still vestiges of segregation. You could see still had two water fountains. And I remember always trying to wonder why did they have 2 water fountains. And then that's what I found out. The 2 water fountains at one point, one was for the blacks, and the other was for white students. One of the incidents that I recall happening there, and again, when I think about those things that help build who I am, we were at school one day, and this white guy called me black. And at that time, you was either colored or Negro. You wasn't, if somebody called you black or the other N word, that was like fighting words. And so when he called me black, I was like, I'm not black, I'm brown. I'm not black, I'm brown, and he and I started fighting, and the teacher came and said, what are y'all fighting for? And I told her why he had called me black. And she said, well, you are. And I really was mad. So I went home and told mama, because I knew mama was going to take care of it. And what she told me was, yeah, son, you are black, and which is really ironic too, because Ashley came home with the same story one day. And I told her, yeah, honey, you, huh? Ashley Drakeford. Oh, yeah, we haven't introduced Ashley Drakeford, who's my oldest daughter. She came home with the same thing, that someone had called her black, and she said, Dad, I ain't. And I said, honey, you are black. She said, Dad, I ain't black, I'm brown. And then I started singing, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud, that James Brown song, say it loud. And she was like, stop, Dad, stop. And I'm saying, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. And so she eventually started saying it with me. And as time would have it, when my youngest daughter, Brittany, came home with the same thing as well. And she was saying, they called me black, Dad. I say, honey, you are black.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, you called me black.
Making up stories.
No, I'm not making up. I said,
You
so
making this up?
no, I'm not making it up. So Brittany was out there, stop, and then Ashley joined in with me this time, and we both were saying, sing it, say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. So I think again, you have to have in your home, you have to have that knowledge. You have to have people in there that can encourage you, because during that time, and even so sometimes now, folks can knock you down, and if you don't have somebody to pick you back up or to rub you and tell you, honey, it's all right, or son, it's gonna be okay, you know, it can destroy your confidence and keep you down for forever. So,
All right. So what other schools did you attend?
so from
Stopped at King or
so
Bradbury Heights.
so it stopped at Bradbury Heights. So when after I left Bradbury Heights, I went to Maryland Park Junior High School. The Maryland Park Junior High School was a tough school. Was a tough school to go to, but hey, it was some tough people live where I lived at, and so we had to do battle some days at school, but it was two guys that was in my class at Bradbury Heights who drowned. Actually, they drowned when we was in the 7th grade.
What school you attended at that point?
When we was at Bradbury Heights when we met, and then we was in middle school together, or as we call it then, junior high school. We was in junior high school, and Tony and Pee Wee, that's their name, Tony Carroll, and I can't remember Pee Wee last name. So it was Anthony Carroll and Pee Wee, and so we were down. We were supposed to all meet one day when we was in the 7th or 8th grade. We were supposed to all meet and play basketball. And so either they got the time mixed up or we got there a little early. So we went down looking for them. They wasn't home. So we happened to wander down there by this pond, which was a closed country club. And we stayed down there for about 20 minutes.
Where was the country club?
The country club was up there off of Marlboro Pike. It's currently Oak Crest Recreation Center up there by what the drive-in used to be, Hillside Drive-In used to be. It was a country club that was right there. And so we came back home because we didn't see Tony and Pee Wee. And then I guess about an hour later, this other friend of ours, Norris Gardner, he came and told us that Tony and Pee Wee had drowned. We was like, "What? How they drowned?" And he told us where they were when they drowned. And we like, that couldn't happen. We just left from there. And he said, no, they was down there and they drowned. So again, we thought maybe they fell in the water or something, not drowned. But so we rushed down there to see, and that time a lot of people was down there. The police was there, and so us not wanting to see anything like that, we came on back home. And later on in the daytime, we saw on TV, we saw them pull their bodies out the water. And then my understanding is that one of them fell in and the other one jumped in to try to save the one that fell in. Now which one fell in and which one tried to save it, I don't really know. I don't really know that. As a matter of fact, the guy Norris who came to tell us, it was my understanding that he actually had fell into the water as well, but he was able to get himself out.
You said the water was like mucky, right?
Yeah, it was like mucky. So I believe that's what happened. It was more like the way, for lack of a better word, it was like quicksand. Because when they fell in, they couldn't really swim because their legs was getting stuck in the mud, and so yeah, it was mucky. And in actuality, they should have had a big fence up or something like that to prevent people from getting in that pond. It was part of my understanding. Again, it was part of a golf course that was there. So that was in Maryland Park middle school, junior high school, and then from there we went. When I say we, my friends and I, we went to Francis Scott Key, and that was the 9th grade year. At that time, the 9th grade was part of junior high school. You didn't go to high school until the 10th grade. So we went to Francis Scott Key Junior High School. We did our 9th grade year there. And there, it was these three white teachers that took a liking to me and three or four of my other friends, and they used to take us down to Lorton. Well, they would take us down there because they wanted us to
They
see.
took y'all to the prison?
Right, yeah. So they took us down there because there was this group of guys that was down there called the Inner Voices, and they were doing theater, and that was my first exposure to the theater, was down seeing Inner Voices, and from that I started, enjoying it. Prior to that, it was like, who want to go to the theater? That's for chums or for nerds or whatever. But once we saw the Inner Voices and the effect that gave us, we all started enjoying the theater after that. So that was Francis Scott Key. And then, and from Francis Scott Key, they gave us a kind of like a survey, and they wanted to know who wanted to go to Crossland Senior High School. And nobody really wanted to go there, but what you got to see, you got a day out of class. So I volunteered for going to Crossland. Me and a couple of my friends, we volunteered to go to Crossland, and so we went over there and toured the school, and we got the day out of class. But what we didn't do though, we didn't take our name off the list. And so when time came around, we had to go to Crossland. Got in a little bit of trouble at the end of the year, so I decided not to go back to Crossland.
What kind of trouble did you get into?
Do you really want to know?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so one of the things we used to do because we had such a long ride to get to Crossland, we used to play cards on the bus.
You was gambling.
Well, we played cards on the bus, and so this one guy, white guy, he said or did something to me, and I can't really remember what it was he said. No, I can't remember now what it was, but then I remember, and so my man said, okay, you need to get him, stop him for whatever he said. I think he called me the N-word. Yeah, that's what it was. He called me the N-word, and I thought he was gonna get off his regular stop, and I got off there, but he didn't get off as a regular stop. And so that was on a Friday. That whole weekend, that's why you shouldn't let stuff stew with you or ride with you. That whole weekend I stewed over that. And when we got on the bus, he spoke to me, hey, how you doing? But I'm still stewing on with the whole weekend. So when we got off the bus, I punched him, and really I knocked him out.
You like knocked him out unconscious?
Yeah. Yeah. And so the people, the authorities, administrators really didn't know what had happened to him, but they said they had to take him to the hospital. And so I guess they had word, somebody had kind of generally said that it was me. And so when they called me to the office, they asked me, was it me? I asked them, did the guy say it was me? And they said, no, he didn't say that. I said, well, why you have me here? And then he said, well, punching somebody like that is not going to resolve anything. And really still being the kind of guy I was at that time, it was like, well, if I punch you like that, if you say that to me and I punch you like that, you won't say that again, will you? So I got suspended then. But because my grades were so good, because that was almost at the end of the year, but because my grades were so good, I didn't have to they told me, well, no sense of you coming back because your grades are going to be what they are. And so I didn't get a chance to take the final exams and anything like that. And so I just said, heck with it, I'm not going back to Crossland. So I went to Suitland the following year.
I didn't realize that.
Mm-hmm.
So what was Suitland like?
Suitland was like crazy there. I mean, it was like, the thing about Crossland was, because my competitive nature, because I was there competing, I thought with white students, I did really good in school. I was, was doing excellent in school. I was doing so good that one of the things, in order to go to Crossland, you had to take algebra prior to enrolling in Crossland. And what somebody had told me was, if I take it in summer school, then that would count, because I hadn't taken algebra in the 8th grade, right? But, well, in the 9th grade, I should say. I hadn't taken it in the 9th grade. And I didn't take it in 9th grade. Not that I didn't think I could do it, but I was looking for an easy class. That's essentially what I was looking for. And I was like, okay, I can take this advanced general math class. Boom, I can knock that out. I don't have nothing to worry about. I can do that blindfold. And everybody had told me, a lot of people had told me, oh, algebra is so tough. It's so tough. Oh, it's so hard. And so I said, okay, fine. But then by me going to Crossland, I said, okay, fine. Let me go and take this class in the summertime, which is, again, another story. Let me go and take this class in the summertime, and so I'll be eligible to go to Crossland when the fall come around. So I took the class in summer school. Now, I was taking it with people who had failed the class, not people who had never taken the class. And I aced the class in summer school. But getting there and getting back and forth was a little difficult. And one particular time I was walking, because most of the time I walk back from Walker Mill to home. So I was walking back to home from, again, like I said, from Walker Mill to Court Hills, and the police stopped me. And they stopped me, and they like, well, they asked me a bunch of questions, and they asked me my name and everything. And they said I look like, or I'm favor, or look like the suspect who had just robbed the store. And I was like, robbed the store? I'm just coming back from summer school. And I had my books in there in my hand and everything. So they told me, get in the car. I'm like, okay, fine. So I got in the car, and because they was taking me to see the people who had robbed the store and see whether or not they could identify me. And the guy said, I heard over the phone, said, no, we got the guy who did it. So he let me out the car. He took me back and let me out the car. So anyway, once I got completed summer school, the algebra class, I was in geometry at that time. I was in Crossland, I was in geometry, and I probably was like, the second quarter was almost over with. And they came and got me and said, hey, the class you took in the summer school didn't count. That was for people who had taken the class and failed it. So you need to take algebra, And so they took me out of the geometry class and put me in algebra, which was, when I think about that now, that's some of the things they do to black children, right? I mean, I believe if I had been a different person, and my mother had been a little more in tune to what was going on, they would have tested me out. I mean, they would have tested me out. Why make me take algebra again when I had already aced it in summer school, where some people had never been exposed to it? In addition to that, I had a B+ or A in geometry. So you're taking me out of class, I got a B+ or A. So obviously, this algebra class, I didn't really need that in order to do geometry. And so, but they took me out of that, and I guess I was a little disenchanted. But again, at Crossland, I was doing really well in class, and because I was competing. And then once I got to Suitland, I only competed in the class that I had figured I had to show somebody I was just as smart as they were. In the other classes that I might have some friends in, it was like, hey, I'm here, give me a grade, whatever. Again, if those some of the things, if I knew then what I knew now, I would have pressed on and pushed all the classes in high school, as well as prepared myself to go to college. Better prepared myself to go to college.
Can you tell me about the riot that happened at Suitland?
Oh yeah, that was so busing had started in order to, supposedly at the time, they was trying to get a better mixture of the black and white students at the various high school campuses. And so when we was at Suitland, one of my close friends, Earl Harrison, he was the president of the class. They were interviewing him, and he was saying, we don't want to be bused. We all friends and family here. And in the background, you could see people fighting and knocking each other down and everything. So I always think that's how comical it was. But yeah, they started busting. People really didn't. They said they didn't want to be bused, but they really didn't want to be together either. So it was one of those dichotomies.
So were there white people at Suitland at the time?
Yeah, at this time, as I said, Crossland probably was about 85, 90% white. Suitland probably was probably about 50-50 at Suitland.
And this would have been in like the mid
This was
1970s.
this was between 1973 and 1972 and 1974.
And then what other types of activities did you do at school?
Well, I played football 1 year. I played basketball 1 year, and I did photography. And the photography, I did that when I was at Suitland, which was a replacement for an art class that I wasn't getting along in that class. I was kind of like not the best student in that class. Not that I wasn't participating in an art project, but I had other things that was distracting me.
Who was it, like what?
Like my friends, like wanting to be a clown, wanting to be liked, not necessarily following the teacher instructions, those kind of things. I mean, I was saying, what do I need art for? I mean, the same thing I think I was saying with history. What do I need history for? But what I since I realized is a lot of those classes, not what you needed for right at that time, but what it does for you. Unfortunately, in history, though, they really didn't teach history in a way that it mattered to black people. I recall when we were talking about slavery, how I would basically want to put my head down and, stick my head in a daggone, in a hole somewhere, because, you kind of feel inferior knowing that you are from slaves. But the reality is the people who were enslaved, they shouldn't have felt, or whose family was enslaved, they shouldn't have felt bad. The people who should have felt bad was the people who really, and the family members of those people who enslaved somebody, And if they had taught, the power and the strength of those people who had been enslaved, they came over, packed on ships and brought to a foreign land, and taking their family and their culture and their names and their language, taking all that from them, and still, in spite of all that, in what really becomes a short time, was able to conquer a lot of those things that was taken from her and restore them in a much stronger way.
Ditto. I agree. Did you attend any protests or social movements growing up?
Yeah, I think the first one I attended, I want to say the 1968 March on Washington, and I went with a friend of mine's, William Workman. Incidentally, he's the same guy who I was with when I got the apprentice electrician job, and I went to the Million Man March, and then I think recently we went to one of the marches down in D.C. I'm not sure what year that was though.
How is the world different from when you were a child?
Okay. Well, do you want me to finish that, to tell you that, or finish the schools?
Oh, I thought you was finished the school stuff. My bad.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No.
All right, you can go back and finish the school.
Okay. Well, I didn't get to the colleges. I didn't get to.
Talked about Bowie though.
Yeah. So
Okay, go ahead.
so actually, when I was working at the men's store, shoe store, I always had. That was after I became. I left I believe it was after I left the electrician job. Yeah, it was. No, actually it was before. Before I left the electrician job, I was working at the men's store, And so I got ready to, I wanted to go back to college. And so I had applied to University of Maryland and waited around for my acceptance notice. And while I was working at the shoe store, my acceptance notice came in, which was incidentally probably like, if school started, let's say school started in August, my notice came maybe early September. So, me not having any knowledge or super knowledge on what you do for, college, I take my acceptance notice, I go up to University of Maryland, I'm like, here it is. I'm supposed to be accepted. And they like, pretty much when I think about now, I know they must have been laughing, but they said, well, classes already started. You would have to get all the teachers to approve, the professors to approve you starting and late, and you would have to pick out your classes. And all that seemed like foreign to me, and it seemed like something I couldn't do, didn't want to do, or whatever. So I said, heck with it, and I went back home. And then that's when shortly after that, I became an apprentice electrician. But again, college again was always in my mind. And so later on, I once I was in the Air Force and I was stationed at Andrews Air Force Base, I started taking classes at Strayer University. I was taking some accounting classes there. And then I left there, and once I got out the Air Force, I started taking classes at Prince George Community College, where I got a associate's degree in management and in accounting. And then from there, I went to Bowie State University, where I got a degree in accounting, and I graduated cum laude. And that may not seem like a huge thing to a lot of people. However, I achieved that milestone while I was going to school full time and working full time. So I would get up early in the morning, probably about 7 o'clock. My first class might start at 8, and generally I wouldn't get home until around 12:30 at night, because I would leave class and go to work full time. And again, like I said, I finished up at Bowie State University. I did take some graduate courses at Bowie State University as well, and I took some additional classes at University of Maryland and the University of Maryland University College.
How has the world changed from when you were a child?
Oh, well, they say the more things change, the more they remain the same. I think one of the biggest changes now that racism then was more overt, whereas now it's more covert. I believe that now that young people they have accountants and doctors and lawyers and Indian chief. They have them in their family, and I'm speaking of African Americans now. They have them in their families. They see them in their neighborhood, so they can see people of certain profession and dream those dreams. They have airline pilots in their neighborhood, or they know them, or they've come in contact with African American airline pilots, so they can dream that. They should be able to dream that dream. I think sometimes that's why it gets so frustrating to me that when I see some of the guys hanging out in the corner and not wanting more. And it's unfortunate, or it's unfortunate in a way, but fortunate in a way, because they're carrying the torch. You see more women aspiring and trying to reach those goals. Just today, I was looking at the newspaper. I was looking at the voting registration, and they had on there people who were running for judges. And in Prince George County, which is one of the most wealthy, predominantly black counties in the country, it was 4 black women and 2 white men. No black man was running for judge. That was kind of like mind blowing to me. Not one. I mean, you had 4 black women and 2 white men, and the predominant, and so I think, like I said, the more things change, the more things remain the same. I think that, I think, you know, just having, I remember, even in Prince George County, for instance, which is now a predominantly black county. I remember growing up in the county how majority of the police officers were white, and you know how I remember them coming in our neighborhood in Coral Hills and you know over there on Bennett Road, and how they would, if something would happen, they would come over there with their shotguns, and you could hear them clack clack, pumping the shotguns and saying, "I want to hear the pitter patter of little feet." And of course, we like, psh, we would run. And I think that's the other thing. It's almost like today seemed like the respect for authority, not only the police officers, and I mean the police do their dirt, no question about that. But I think the respect from authority comes from the home. So if you respect your parents, and then you're gonna respect other authority figures. I mean, and it's more than one way to skin a cat, and that's one of the things I always try to preach to Ashley and Brittany, that you know, just get it done. You know, you don't have to, you know, it's not so much as, you know, tedious step by step. And so if somebody's giving you a hard time, you don't have to go straight back at them. You can say, okay, I'm gonna take care of this. Okay, I'm gonna live another day, and I'm gonna go and get this resolved. If it means you have to write a paper, call in your councilman, or any of that, then do that. It's because we have those avenues now. But yeah, it's I think now you see home ownership, for instance. You know, black people own homeowners, $1 million, $2 million homes. You know, black people owning business, even though there are less black business than probably was then. A lot of the black business now are, you have more multi-million-dollar black business that you wouldn't have back then.
Can you tell me about let's talk about your grandparents
Okay, so
in South Carolina.
okay, so my grandparents. I'll start with my grandparents and my great grandparents. Right. I'll start with my grandparents on my father's side. So my father's father his name was George Washington Drakeford. So my grandfather's name was George Washington Drakeford. My father's name was just George Drakeford Jr. So so that was my father's name. His mother's name was Matilda Cauthen, Cathen, Chuthen, Matilda Cauthen Drakeford. And my father's grandfather's name was Ben Bennett, and his grandmother, my father's grandmother's name was Rachel Drakeford. Ben Bennett was a white man who had, my understanding, 10 children by Rachel Drakeford, and he didn't. My understanding, he didn't have any other children. And eventually, before he died, he left some land for his wife, or not his wife, his concubine, or his woman, Rachel Drakeford. He left some land for them, which that land is still in the family name as well. And my mother's father name was David Mackey, and my mother's mother's name was Christine Stewart Mackey. And my mother's grandfather on her father's side was Green Mackey, and his wife was Jane Harvey Mackey. And my understanding that my grandfather David Mackey was the second set of children by second set of children by Green Mackey. It was the land that he owned. My grandfather owned approximately about close to 150 acres of land, and he before he died, he willed a portion to each of his children. Well, each of his children, except for the one that had been who was deceased prior to him dying. For whatever reason, I guess he didn't think about her or whatever. He didn't leave her or her children anything. In the land, like I said, it was about 150 acres of land. Also, it was some land in Ohio that he owned as well. And, yeah, but you know, family stories get lost sometimes, and folks sneak around with who's in the know. They sneak around, so I believe that land was lost.
Do you know how much land that was?
I think it was less than 10 acres. Yeah.
And so what happened to the land now? Like, where's the land? Is the land still in the family possession, or
Which land? The land in Ohio?
the land in South Carolina?
The land in South Carolina, yes, that's still predominantly in the family possession. I say predominantly because it was a battle they had. Once my grandmother died, there was a land battle, if you will. My grandfather was shrewd enough to say how many acres he get each child would get. However, because my grandmother was still living at the time, he left the house and the land that was undetermined. And so one of the sticking points was, I say in the land battle, one of the sticking point was who get the house. And some of my cousins seemed to think they could live in the house and not pay anything. And so eventually it went to court. And then my grandfather had said, okay, I'm giving, for instance, he might say, I'm giving you 14 acres. I'm giving you 12 acres because I already gave you 2 acres. I'm giving you, 11 acres because I already giving you 3 acres. And so, and then he also said that if you can't choose among yourselves, then draw straws. And I always thought that was pretty straightforward, pretty simple, whatever. However, because of the house wasn't, and the 2 acres that surround the house wasn't willed to anybody, that was the kind of sticking point, and it stayed in court, or lawyers had their way for about, I say, 5 to 10 years.
Whoa.
Yeah. And eventually they had to sell the house and the land connected to it to pay for the lawyers. Now, that house and the land, one of my cousins wanted to buy the house and land. He was one of the siblings. He was the child of my aunt Sarah, who had not been willed any land, and he wanted to buy the house. However, when they got ready to sell it to him, my understanding, the person who was in charge of the land increased the price, and he said, "The heck with it," or better yet, he said, "The hell with it," and he decided not to buy it. And so that land was sold. In addition to that, when we was growing up, it was some land kind of like in the middle of the 150 acres that we always thought was part of my grandfather's land. And I think it was like probably was in the 90s, somebody started building on that land, and it was a white family started building on that land. And we were like, okay, who's building on, grandpapa's land? And come to find out, the white family that was building on it was the same family who had sold the land to my grandfather, reluctantly sold it to my grandfather, because he had to be forced to sell it based on some judicial stuff that occurred. And I'm not exactly sure all the specifics, but my understanding that, the deed was drawing up and my grandfather had given the money, but he tried to hold back on my grandfather and not sell the land to him.
That means that they had to go to court.
Right, they had to go to court. Yes, they had to go to court.
So did you go down to South Carolina often?
Not really. I haven't been down there in a while. Last time I was there, I believe, was for a funeral. Yeah.
Somebody passed away this year, right?
Yeah. Oh, on my father's side.
No, your mother. Yes.
Right. My father's sister passed away. Right.
You don't go down for that?
No, we did not.
I
Yeah.
don't remember anybody talking about it.
Yeah. So she, and I think probably Not that it mattered, but she had been in a nursing home, you know, and she had dementia. So she really didn't know anybody, even when she was, you know, for the last like 15 years, she didn't know anybody.
Tell me about your marriages.
Okay, so when I was, I guess when I was like probably around 21, 22, 21, sure enough, I saw a lot of cars in this particular hotel, and I stopped and I went in. That's where it was, and that's where I met Sharon, Rita at the time, your mother. I met her at Clarence Hicks' first marriage. And just so happens Clarence Hicks is the guy I played basketball with at Crossland, and he just happened to be Sharon's cousin. I think initially when I saw her, she looked mighty young. I thought she was like 15 or 16, but she was a good-looking young lady. And so I asked somebody about her, because even though she looked 16 or 17, she was acting older than that. Not nothing, you know, I mean, nasty or anything like that. She just acted older than 16 or 17. And I found out at the time I believe she was 20 at the time. I'm like, okay. So we started talking. And from that point on, we went out and dated. And in 1982, we got married.
You got any children?
Yes, I have 2 children. One, their mother named Ashley Marie Drakeford, and the other one I named Brittany.
Oh, you named me.
Brittany Marie, Brittany Nicole Drakeford. And from that, ironically, one started with A, the other one started with B, and that's why their mother started calling her A and B child. And I think some people think first, second, but no, that wasn't really what it was. Yeah, and so we got married in, I believe it was August 14th.
August 7th.
August 7th, thank you.
I was born August 14th.
Okay, 1982. All right.
Any other thing? What was it like being a parent? Or what was
Oh yeah, and I said being a parent was scary. I mean, it was something that, you know, you had never done. You wanted to make sure you did it right, and you know, we just didn't know. I think the other literally scary thing about it was when Ashley was born, she had when she was born, her mother's water broke, and then her mother went to the hospital again. Just to show you how uneducated, how really ignorant we was about that circumstance at the time. She went on to the doctor, and I went to work. And then while I was at work, these older ladies was asking me about her and asked me what's going on. And I told her, well, something's fluid was something, and she had to go to the doctor. And they said, fool, you better get your butt out here. And so I ran and met her at the hospital. She was getting ready to go into labor. And then she went in labor, and we found out it was a girl. And I called Miss Rita and told her it was a girl. And she started hollering on the phone, it's a girl, and hung the phone up. That's it. I said, she don't want to know they're healthy or whatever, you know. And so, yeah, so that was kind of scary. And then when Brittany was being born, she had started to breach. She had breached, and so her feet was coming out first, and they had to turn her around. They wanted to make sure she didn't choke on her umbilical cord, and she did. And it was, I think the ironic thing about Brittany and Ashley, and people might still see it in their personalities today. Ashley would lay on the bed, and while Sharon and I would get ready for work, and we didn't have to worry about her. But when Brittany was around that same age, we had to put pillows all around the bed, because Brittany would like roll off the bed, and you know, so we had to watch her all the time. So yeah, but it was, you know, being a parent was scary. Then, you know, you want to be able to mold them, and you want all the best things for them. You want them, most of all, you want them to love God, and you want them to love themselves. And so you want to give them the tools, because you know, in this world we're in, we're gonna have people throwing darts at them and hating on them, and you want to make sure they have the tools they need to combat those type of things.
Was
Yeah.
there ever a time when you were so frustrated with being a parent that you almost felt like giving up, or you didn't want to be a parent anymore?
No, I never felt like that. I mean, it were times when I was, frustrated, not as being a parent. I was frustrated with the children, but no, I never not wanted to be a parent. I never, no, I never felt that. I wish I never was a parent. No, I never felt that.
You
Matter of
never felt
fact,
like you didn't want to parent anymore.
no, I never felt that. As a matter of fact, in many cases, they were my saving grace, my children. Had it not been for them, I think that helped me to push myself a little harder, when they were born, so I could make sure they had the things that I thought they needed. I think a lot of times people wonder why you have, God made it such that He have two parents. Two parents takes two parents to make a child. Well, and I believe that's because each one of them will give something else. And I know we're gonna get to this point somewhere. But however, I remember when Brittany and Ashley's mother passed, sometimes I would ask myself, God, why you didn't take me and leave her here? She the better parent. She can carry him. But I again, it's one thing about God. You can ask him questions. I think a lot of people don't believe that, don't think that, but it's not that you're questioning God. You're just trying to understand. And what He told me, that Sharon had did her job. Now it's up to you to do your part. And so I look, and sometimes it's not that it had to be like. Well, I guess it did have to be like that, because God is God. However, I understand now that I have a role and Sharon had a role. In some cases, you can do it at the same time. In some cases, God's saying, no, you need to step up more. And so, and it leads me back to Romans 8:28, which is my favorite scripture. Some people might think that's the only scripture I know, but it says, all things work for the good for those who love Christ, according to that are called and according to His purpose. It didn't say some things. It didn't say the good things. It didn't say, the extra thing. It said all things. And I truly can look back and see some of those suffering that I went through and how it impacted my life for the good.
If there was one word you could use to describe your life, what would it be?
Favored. Right. Favored. Yeah, that'd be favored. Yeah. And I'd say that, again, go back to Romans 8:28, I mean, I didn't plan on, I hate to throw out stuff, but I didn't plan on working on the FDIC and making the money I was able to make. I didn't plan on, I didn't put the plan together. I didn't start off with a plan to own multiple houses and rent out property. I didn't plan to be able to retire. It's a whole lot of things I didn't plan, and I know I was in a situation that things could have gone wrong and didn't. So I can look back and thank God. I know I've been faithful. Thank God for those things He allowed to happen that He didn't have to allow happen, and those things He prevented from happening that He stopped from happening. Those doors He kept closed that I so strongly tried to open. Some things I look back and like, man, I'm glad I didn't get into that. So
Sure.
no, go ahead.
Any last words?
Oh yeah, I think the last word. I wrote this paper, and it's about suffering, and talks about the cross and the lynching tree, and it talks about how close how similar people who were lynched have to go through with other suffering. And my biggest suffering was to this day was losing my wife, Sharon, at that time, and thinking that I didn't want nobody to love me, and I didn't want to love anybody, and so I never thought that didn't want to remarry. However, God has other plans for you, and so I was able to go on. What I was saying about the paper, my paper was, can suffering allow a person to remarry after the age of 50? Because if you look at the statistics, it'll show you that somebody getting married at that late in life is, it's kind of improbable, especially getting married to somebody that they care about and that they love. And I had the opportunity to remarry Della Tomlin, who I believe is an outstanding wife. And it's ironically, when you meet somebody that you care about, you don't really want to compare them to somebody that you've been with, especially somebody that you was married to for 22 years. However, but one of the things I noticed early on is that her heart, her delivery is different, but her heart is the same as Sharon's heart is, and God has given me a second opportunity to do some things differently than I did the first time. Both of them had sarcoidosis. Matter of fact, that was the cause of Sharon's death, and Della also had sarcoidosis. By the way, is a woman's primarily African American woman's illness, even though men do get it, but primarily African American woman's disease. And so I just had to make sure that I do my part and trying to help her stay healthy. Not that I didn't do a portion of my part, but I don't know if I was as vigilant as I probably should have been in that. And I think the final thing, maybe I'll say that for another time. Yeah, huh?
Okay.
Yeah, because it's my testimony, and I don't know if this is the right place for that.
No, we're just gonna have to do a series of videos.
Right. So was there anything else we missed?
I don't think so. Did we?
I don't know.
I think we got through everything.
Go down memory lane for a minute. You see, my dad was more like the God in the Old Testament that said, although he didn't go to church every Sunday, he made sure that the 5 of us went as often as possible.
Amen.